Hey everyone, welcome back to the Geek Writer. Today I have a special interview for you with the amazing host of Actually and one of my personal favorite creators on the planet, Mr. Michael Trapp. We talked about the show and about many other things and got some questions from you, the audience. Let's get right to it.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
How are you doing, man?
Doing okay. Yeah, everything's fucked, but like other than that, fine.
Okay, so I have a few questions for you.
Yeah.
And also, I have some fan questions.
Okay.
Yeah, it's going to be. I filtered out all the "Did you kill Pat?" and all that.
It takes a little while, sure. Yeah, I appreciate that.
Okay, so we are going to talk in this interview about the new season of Actually, and
Okay.
also about some other things,
Okay.
like you specifically, because we miss you.
Okay. I miss you guys too.
Okay, so the first question here is about this season of Actually, the structure. Like, what is different in this season from other seasons?
Yeah, so there's probably like two big immediately noticeable differences. One is that we pretty much almost every episode has like some specific theme to it, whether that's like um, a content specific theme, like it's all anime or something, or whether it's more to do with the players themselves. Like it's like, oh, these are some fan favorites, or some other surprises that we have lined up for the rest of the season. The other thing is that previously we were able to sort of collect a bunch of like fan corrections of things that I screwed up and include that as like mid episode breaks of being like, okay, let's call you out. And we kind of weren't able to do that this year because that always required us having the episode 98% done, but not scheduling it for delivery because we were waiting for those corrections to come in. And then I would have to rush into the booth, record those corrections, and then our post department would wrap it all up, put it in a nice package, and get it out there. But everyone's so shorthanded right now, and I'm not full-time with College Humor anymore, so the logistics of making all that didn't make any sense. So, which is a bit of a shame. It is always a thing that I like doing. One, because like it acknowledges that I am extremely fallible, even though like in the show I'm taking this position of being this sort of like all-knowing authority, like nothing could be farther from the truth. So I like sort of acknowledging that. And two, I know that people like play along at home, so it kind of gives a chance to be like, all right, like you caught something wrong, like you're playing along at home, you should get a brief moment in the spotlight, even if it is just like a quick throwaway thing. But yeah, that's that.
In the latest episode, in the one about anime that
Mm.
came out, there was this moment that someone corrected you, and
Uh-huh.
then you were like, "Yeah, give it all to me, give it all,"
Yeah.
because if you don't, they will.
It's true. I mean, like anything that they're going to pick up, there's going to be 500 people who also pick up on it. So it's like, you know what? If it's acknowledged in the episode, I don't need to get 500 tweets about it. Like we can just do this right now, make fun of me, beat me up, and then we can move on.
So good. um, I wanted to ask you about the structure of like doing stuff in COVID. Like you're
Mm.
all from home, and this season is like everything is like in a video call. Um, I do appreciate that you and Sam and anyone else that's doing like episodes and stuff. You have like a really good camera.
I did actually. Yeah. No, we the e- not all the contestants have all
Yeah.
this stuff, but like since we knew that I was going to be in every episode and was going to be on camera for a very long time, we there was one day where some folks masked up, came in, they delivered a very nice camera, set up some lights in a room. Like the room that I'm in right now, it is the same room that we were shooting the season in. But there was a wall behind, a fake, actually wall behind me. So it was like a little mini set. We had a bunch of lights set up here, and it was very close to a professional set, except like I was controlling everything. So like between takes, like I had to make sure the camera was picking things up, and so it is a little bit more professional than just sort of the computer's webcam for my pickups. Everyone else had whatever setup they already had, which for some people is nice if they're already like professional Twitch streamers or something like that, and for others is just kind of like what I'm using right now.
Yeah. Okay. How many episodes are in this season of I'm Actually?
There are 12 episodes in this season, 12. And I'm not sure what episode we're up to right now, but I'm guessing we're probably about halfway through the season at this point.
I think the next one will be fifth.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so we're just about halfway. 12 episodes, and I'm already working on the next 12 episodes. So there should be more coming out with not too long of a break in between.
Okay, that's good to hear. Is there a new themed episode in this season that you're especially excited about?
There is one that I think is very fun and is very unusual, and is something that people have been asking for. I'm trying to remember if we've specifically announced that it's coming up yet or not. I think we have, or at least we've hinted at it, so I feel okay saying it. There is an episode where I am playing as a contestant and someone else is hosting, but I'm not going to tell you who's hosting. I'll leave that as a surprise. But yeah, that is. I think that was a fun one, just because like it is. That's like a very clear like break in structure of like, oh, this is different from stuff we've done, and it was a little interesting to be on the other side of the desk, so to speak, and try being a contestant for a little while.
That's incredible. I had like one of the fan questions is actually related to that. It's not like saying specifically in that episode. Like someone asked, and we'll get to that later. How if you were playing?
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll find out.
Okay. So another question here is about something that Sam said in his latest AMA on Reddit. He said that everyone is working on, like everyone from the cast is working on contract basis. So what I wanted to ask was whether we can see you in maybe other projects on Dropouts.
Yeah. I mean, I'll pop up in some Game Changer, and I think the first episode just of that dropped recently, which I think I was in, if I'm getting my order right. So I'm there. There's
the sellout one, yeah.
Yes, that's right. And there's a second episode too that I'll be in. There's I'm trying to think what else is going on. I've been writing some little sketches and stuff that have still been coming out. So those will keep popping up. But it's on like a sort of like ad hoc project by project basis of like, oh, here's an idea, a script that I have, like maybe I can write this up real quick, or if Sam or anyone who's still over there has a show idea or some new thing, then they might bring me in. But there's not like a whole lot that's like lined up right now. It's like, oh, there's like a billion shows and I'm in all of them for a million different reasons. But I'll keep popping up here and there in the places you might expect me to, I guess.
Okay. Great. So there are a few more questions here that I want to get to. Okay, so this one, okay, so I won't say fan names because I don't want to butcher their names with my
Sure.
foreign pronunciation, but I will have them like here on when this comes
Oh, you
out.
don't want people giving you shit for mispronouncing things? Is that what I'm hearing? No,
Exactly.
that's very considerate. Yeah.
um, okay, so who is somebody you always wanted to have on the show?
There's a bunch of New York folks, and actually, we were able to get a few New York people on the show this season because we were filming remotely. So it's like, well, it's just as easy for them to get on a camera in New York as it is to get on a camera in LA. So why not? Some of those folks are, I'll go ahead and spoil this. Owen Parsons is a former College Humor cast member and a very old good friend of mine who I've been wanting to get on the show forever, but he's pretty much always in New York. But we got him on this season for an upcoming episode. Mike Drucker has done like our live show at New York Comic Con almost every year, and he's supremely funny and very good at what he and very knowledgeable, and just like we've never been able to line up like when we happen to be shooting in LA and if he happens to be out there visiting. There's also some folks like Brett White, I knew a little bit when I was in New York, who does a bunch of like comics writing and TV writing. Just like clearly one of these people, it's like, oh, you just love geeking out about this stuff. Like your Twitter feed is like so much of this. Would love to get him on. And then there's always been like these sort of things of like, it'd be really fun to convince like Patrick Stewart to come on or something like that. But even those like the really like big names, are I've always been a little hesitant about like having them come on to be contestants, because it's like I feel like a lot of folks like don't, especially if you're an actor and if you're in like a beloved role or something like that, you probably know a fair amount about your specific role, but you may not even be a fan of the show you're in. Like that happens sometimes, and I think that can make actors uncomfortable. And I don't want to put them in that position, but I've always wanted to get more out of like the like guest questioner sort of things of like, it's like, can we get a couple of celebrities to be like, let's just ask a couple of questions? And it's never that easy because people are busy, and even to do like a couple of questions is an imposition on their time, and they'll rightly want to be paid for it and stuff. So it never quite works out. But yeah, who else? Fiona Staples, we had like a half connection to one time. It was like, how we good to get her on. Yeah, Noelle Stevenson and Molly Ostertag have been wanting to get on for a little while and haven't quite been able to. And we've got a list of folks who would just be like, oh, it'd be fun, let's make this happen. And sometimes it's scheduling, sometimes it's people just don't want to do it. And yeah, it's all, any reason is fine. If you can't do it, if you're not able to do it, that's fine. And we'll just keep trying to get people on.
You should pit Molly against Brennan and see what happens. I love you, Brennan. Okay, the next question is a good segue to this. Someone asked,
Great.
Who do you think will come on the show and beat Brennan?
Well, let's see. Let's see. I'm trying to think how to. I'll say this. I think there's an episode coming up where Brennan gets a pretty good run for his money, and I think I think on a coin flip things could have wound up one way or another, and I won't say how things wound up or what's going on there, but I will say that that if there's a rematch there, I think we could have the opposite of what actually happens in the show. So that's very vague because I'm trying not to give any spoilers, and I don't want to say like who actually won and what's going on, but I think there's a very good matchup in an upcoming episode.
I'm excited. Okay, so now
there's a few moments in that episode where one of my favorite things that ever happens in them actually is when if I throw like a really obscure or tough thing in there and someone just like gets it right away. I think that happened a couple times in like the Disney episode this past season, and I think a few times maybe in the horror one. There's been like, yeah, sometimes where it's like I'll drop something in there. It's like I don't expect anyone to get this right, but I think someone might stumble their way in the right answer, and it's a fun piece of trivia that I want to talk about. So I'll put this in there. We'll stumble through, and then we'll have a fun discussion. But when you do that, and then someone is just immediately like, "Oh, that's the third quadrant of the Horsehead Nebula," or whatever. It's just like, oh, I didn't. Oh, yeah, that's right. You got it. Or it's like, oh, that's issue 12 of whatever, like Deadpool or whatever. It's like, oh, it's like you just got this. You knew it. And there's a few moments like that. And when that happens, when there's a few moments like that in an upcoming episode, the one I was talking about with Brennan, where even Brennan is sort of like mouth agape, like like, oh, okay, how did you know that? Which is very fun to see, like when you get that big reaction from all the contestants. It's just like, oh, you're shocking everyone here, which is great.
I think the two things I enjoy the most about actually is first the trivia beats that you throw in there, because they're so like mwah, sweet. And the other one is like the interaction between the players. And when you tell me something like that, that makes me so like I want to see that episode right now.
Well, great, yeah, it's coming. Yeah, I mean, from the beginning, I was sort of saying it's like I want the show to have the feeling of like you and your friends like hanging out and just dissecting this thing that you love. It comes from like the title and the structure of the show comes from like a more snarky place, but I've always tried to be very upfront about like we're not trying to be exclusionary or overly snarky or attacky on the show. Like it should feel more like we're all going to take this frog that we love and dissect it and take it apart piece by piece and show each other how cool the parts are and just sort of like geek out with each other for a little while.
Awesome. Okay, so earlier I told you that there is a question about you playing in the game.
Yes.
If you could play the game yourself, who would you like to host the show, and against whom would you like to play?
Yeah, so I might have to punt on this question a little bit because this does happen in an upcoming episode, not too far from now. So we do have a different host, and obviously there's other contestants. So I'll say, I'm trying to think how much I can answer here. I'll say for hosts, there were like a couple people that we were talking about, and there's always there's this general idea that's like, oh, if this works, like maybe this will be something we do again. And we sort of, it gives us a chance to sort of like try out a couple different like alternate hosts in case I ever, get horribly sick or get like hell or like break all my limbs or something like that. If like the worst happens in a sort of like Tonight Show kind of way and like, oh, we need someone else to come in and host. It's like, oh, this is a good opportunity actually to sort of like audition some sort of like potential hosts. So there's a few people we had in mind. I won't say who we eventually decided that we'd go with for this one, but I think it was a good choice. And then as far as like who would I play against, I was not a part of that for this particular episode. Part of the challenge of doing the episode where I was a contestant is normally I'm looking at if I'm not writing the questions, I'm at least looking at them and tweaking them and adjusting them. But obviously I couldn't do that for this episode. And similarly with like contestants and casting and stuff like that, I'll at least like look to see like, okay, who do we have? What's going on? So this one was a total black box for me. It's like, I didn't know who I was playing against. I had no idea what the questions were. And I think that is the right way. Like if I'm a contestant, I shouldn't have a say in who my opponents are. But I do like, again, to have this sort of sense of sort of like camaraderie and joie de vivre on the show. I always think it's nice if at least like two people on the couch already know each other a little bit. Like I found it just like puts people at ease, where they're like, oh, my friend's here. And then everyone gets to know the third person and we all just become one big happy group of friends. So I guess that would be important, but yeah, I guess you'll see for yourself very soon.
Okay. Okay. People want to know, and I got this question multiple times.
Okay.
If you are coming back for another D20 side quest.
Right now, I am not scheduled to. I would happily do it, but I think there's also a ton of people who would happily play D&D with Brennan, and so I am, like I'm not going to be like, but I sort of see it as like, it's like, well, this is like, I'd happily be on another side quest, but I also feel like it's good to give other people a chance to play, and that it's it's not my decision at all. So I shouldn't. I'm not like pressuring anyone or banging down any doors to be like, let me come back on, because there's lots of good people who have a chance to play. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I should say. I think I never know sometimes, because like sometimes I know like there are things being planned that it's like, I don't know how public this is, what their release strategy is for this. I know there are at least some other side quests being planned. I know that I am not in them, but I do think there's some interesting and exciting people coming up. So you'll have to do without me, but I think you'll still be happy with the choices that are made.
Awesome. Are you playing D&D like on your free time, like since you've been introduced to it?
Not a whole lot. There is there's a game that I've started playing with Zach, with Zach DMing, which he might be releasing, but we'll see. Again, I never know what I'm allowed to say. But Zach is putting together a little project that a D&D project, and I've been playing with him there. And I think I think people will get a kick out of that once it's all packaged up. And then Michael Saltzman, who is our fact checker and question writer on the show, who you sometimes see every once in a while when we're live fact checking in the show, is in the middle of putting a game together, but it hasn't actually started. So we've done some preliminary character creation and stuff like that, but and in general, like world discussion and things, but the game itself has not started.
Awesome. Okay. What is the most interesting fact you learned while doing research for Actually?
There are a bunch. I should have come prepared for this one. And it's also hard because sometimes I'll learn things and then I'll either forget them, or it will become like, after a little while, it will become passé. Like what was once like, can you believe this? it's like, yeah, I've known that for a month now. That's not interesting anymore. So it's hard for me to like put myself back into the position of sometimes of like where I was when I learned things. I will say one thing that stuck in my mind and has remained there because I've never been able to craft it into a satisfying question, and I don't think I ever will. And that is that in dance, the song "Dance Magic" from the movie Labyrinth, there is that sort of like, you remind me of the babe. What babe? Like that little exchange that is burned in my brain, and I learned at some point that whole exchange is lifted almost wholesale from this old movie called The Boxer and the Bobby Soxer? Baby and the Bobby Soxer? One of those two things. Look it up. I'm wrong. One of those is right. One of those is wrong. I don't know. One of these always lies. One always tells the truth. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, it's just this sort of like kind of flirty exchange that just got lifted wholesale and used in that song. Except replacing the word voodoo with hoodoo, which makes more sense because then it's a pun. It's hoodoo and hoodoo. So it was like, so many things are coming together here. Like different worlds are colliding. Questions are being answered. And it's such an obscure thing, and that there's no, like, I wouldn't expect anyone to know that. It's hard to phrase a question to try to lean in that direction. So it's like, I think this is interesting. I think this is weird, but I don't know how to share it with anyone. So it's just sort of remained in my document of like, maybe this can turn into something at some point. Aside from other, it's not like a fact, but I do always love, I do have a soft spot for things like one of like a season 1 questions where like the really like persnickety tricky questions, like talking about how, for example, all the characters in Star Wars speaking basic instead of English and stuff like that, which is just like where like you hear the answer, you just go like, like it makes people say like fuck. Like I do like those questions, even though they're not interesting trivia, because it does kind of get to like it presses a very specific button with the game that you can't do anywhere else, which is just like extreme technicality that even if you know is true, you may not think of, you may not think to say. I'll think a little bit more if there's any other like really interesting pieces of trivia. Some of them, a lot of them are like I feel like Nintendo has some stuff because they're constantly like reinventing their own canon, and like things will pop up in like a Nintendo Power magazine that clearly someone just wrote on a whim, and it's like, this is canon now. Like, I don't think that counts. I'm struggling to think of any specific examples right now, but I'll keep thinking on it. If I think of something later, I'll bring it back up.
Okay. Okay. So the last part that I wanted to have here is something that I don't do it personally, but I've seen many people starting to do streams on Twitch that are I'm actually based, like themes.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask if you have like any tips for people who want to start their own like kind of stream, or maybe like on YouTube. How would you introduce this thing to new people?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I would say like know what tone you're striving for when you're going in is good. You know, my goal was always like, it's like, I want this to be like a little QIE. Like I would bring that up a bit, like a sort of like kind of British panel show type thing of like, I wanted to feel like we're all having fun and discussing and having a good time. But I also wanted to make sure it had elements of like seeing people succeed when you don't expect them to. So I always try to have my episodes have like a couple of questions that are a little bit easier, and some that are a little bit harder, and some that are nearly impossible but fun to discuss. And that, I feel like that gives us a nice spread of people who are like, I know the answer to this, I'm coming in, and you can watch me watch me be great. Because if the game is most fun when people are actually getting questions right. Like if it's both like, it's not as fun to watch when people are struggling, and people playing like, just like if it's just wrong question after wrong question, or just like wild guess after wild guess, you can feel the energy in the room start to come down. So as much as you do want to try to challenge people, you also want to make sure that like people have a chance to shine. If you're aiming for like a we're all having fun here tone, which I think is good. So don't write your questions so hard that people can't actually play the game. And the way I'll usually do that is like, sometimes I'll provide like a couple ways into an answer. Like if a question is particularly hard, for instance, like if it requires a very specific detail that's like, I don't know if people are going to know this, I might make the wrong thing another recognizable thing. So for instance, in an upcoming episode, like I have a question about Inspector Gadget's alter ego, and it's like, I don't think many people know the name of Inspector Gadget's alter ego. I don't think it's ever said on the show, and it's like this weird obscure piece of trivia. But a lot of people know RoboCop's alter ego, and RoboCop and Inspector Gadget have a lot of similarities, in that they're both, cyborg crime fighters. So like I put that in there as the wrong answer. So even if someone is like, I don't know what that is, like I do recognize that name. So it gives someone two ways in to answer the question, by either being able to identify the wrong thing or know the right thing. And I would also when I write my questions, I always have, like, I have the statement, I have the correction, and then for each thing I have a little, like a conversation starter ready for myself. And that could be, sometimes that is like a joke, basically. Like it's like, oh, I'm talking about this because I think it's crazy that, like it's like almost like a sketch pitch, but for something so obscure that like, it's like, I could never write a sketch about this because no one's going to care about like the specific details of, I was about to say purge rules, but we did write a sketch about that. But you get the idea. Like it's like, oh, this is so like nerdy and specific that like no one's gonna give a shit. But I still think it's funny, and the people on this couch will think it's funny, so we can talk about that. Sometimes it'll just be a question where it's like, like what's your starter Pokemon or whatever. Like that's the first thought dumb thing, but like having something ready so that like the thing you don't want to have happen is like, it's like I'm actually like that was Swords of Shannara, and everyone just kind of goes like, okay, and it's like, all right, moving on. Like it just sort of kills the thing. So like, make sure you have something that you actually want to talk about this thing that you just said, so that you have a bit of that discussion afterwards.
Awesome. And how do you like I think for many people who want to do this like I'm actually themed stream, I think it's like coming up with questions is one of the challenges.
Yeah.
So how would you say, like, how do you research? Like, do you put yourself into a Wikipedia hole or something? Or
yeah. It's it takes a long time to write the questions, like longer than you would think it should, and it only gets longer the more the show goes on, because season 1 you're just sort of plucking all the low-hanging fruit of like, oh, here's a common misconception, here's a thing that hardcore nerds know but like your average person doesn't, and you can take those things, and then as you start to pull the low-hanging fruit, you have to like reach higher and higher and higher to find that stuff. So yeah, it is hard. The way I approach it is is from a couple different directions. One is generally like from a trivia or observation first thing. So like if I do find a piece of like unusual trivia, then it's like, okay, I can turn that into a question, because even if people don't know the answer, it gives us something to talk about, and it's fun to discuss, and it's maybe surprising. So like trivia, misconceptions are another one. If there's something that like you see people get wrong a lot, like it's like people spell Wookiee wrong a lot. And that makes sense because Wookiee is spelled crazy. Like you don't expect that second E at the end, but there it is. It's I-E-E. That's weird. And like that's a it's a very basic example, but like if you see something like that where it's like, oh, people keep getting this wrong, that also makes like a good question. But beyond that, it is sort of like, sometimes I'll have a piece of trivia stored away, or I'll stumble across one and be like, oh great, I can use that. But if I don't have those, if I've like burned through all the stuff that I already know, then it truly is like, let me just go to fan wikis. Let me go to Wikipedia pages. Like those aren't always like, there's inaccuracies on there too. So like you sometimes have to double check those things, but just like sometimes I've definitely found questions by just following links in wikis and seeing something and being like, wait, what is that? Tell me more about Luke with 2 U's, and then if you feel yourself having that reaction of like, wait, what are you talking about? Like, that's a good indication that it'll be something interesting to talking about, because if you're surprised by it, chances are other people are going to be too.
That's great. I remember like one of the weirdest Wikipedia holes that I went through was actually the English monarchy and all the and all the weird things that they did over there.
History's crazy. Yeah, you'll tell if I'm in the middle of researching an Actually season, because I'll just start posting like snippets of Wikipedia articles and things like that, because like sometimes I'll find stuff and just be like, I don't think I can actually use this, but I do want to talk to someone about this. Or I like recently found myself on the Wikipedia entry for Jeff the Talking Mongoose, which was a hoax that sort of like, it's like, oh, there's a ghostly mongoose here in our English country house or whatever that I had never heard of. I just like found myself on this Wikipedia page. It's like for Jeff the Talking Mongoose, and a big like news article about Jeff the Talking Mongoose. I'm just like, how did I get here? What is going on? What is this thing? It's like, I don't think I can use this for a question, but it's interesting as hell.
I think you are to blame for one of the times one of your tweets drove me to learn about ducks mating or something like that.
It's weird.
And I was like, oh my God.
They've got long corkscrew penises. Yep.
Okay. Is there a topic you actively avoided covering in Actually?
Yes, sort of. I'm trying to think now. Like, I feel like there have been times where we've been like, so I'll start very general and boring. Sometimes we'll get people being like, oh, you should do like a math Actually, or a science Actually, or stuff like that. And I do actively avoid those things because I do think part of the fun of the show is that it's like, this is necessarily about really trivial stuff. Like it's all pop culture. It's all things that like is not really that important. But people love it. So like people will spend so much time learning the details about like the Zelda timeline or the history of Hyrule or something like that, and know absolutely nothing about maybe I probably know more people where if I ask them, like, tell me the history of Hyrule, they could just rattle on and on and on. And then if I say, now tell me the history of Canada, like they would just freeze up. It's like I don't think they could tell you like one thing. And I think it's funny for one thing. But it also like sort of points to this thing like, it's like, yeah, we learn what we feel like excited to learn about. And we devote all this time to the stuff that doesn't matter. So to me, things like math and science always felt like, well, that stuff does matter. It's like, it's kind of less interesting or it feels like less funny to me that someone might know a lot about math or science. It's like, oh, it's not funny. It's good. You should know a lot. Like, I wish I knew more about math and science. Good job, So I do tend to avoid those things. Not that I do think someone probably could put together like an interesting math or science Actually, it's just something that on this specific show we kind of decided early. It's like let's not do that, because then you also start to be the arbiter of like what's geeky, what's nerdy, which is like I absolutely don't want to be in that position. I think anyone can geek out about anything, and like I think anyone's passions are just like cool. Like I love just hearing what people get excited about. But like I didn't want to have to be in this position of saying like, well, soap operas are good, but this is bad. Like, so like having a very clear rule of like what we're talking about here are fictional worlds. Like we're talking about worlds that don't exist and are created. And if it has an element of a fictional world, and like that could be like a musical, or that could be like a comic book, but it probably wouldn't be like. Or it even could be like a soap opera, or just like when we did like TV and sitcoms and stuff like that. It's like, oh, those are all fictional worlds, even if they're not like heightened genre worlds. It's like, but it's probably not going to be like reality TV. It's probably not going to be math. So we do avoid those things. I'm also working on, or just finished writing questions on an episode that I avoided for a little while just because it got into some. I'm a big fan of like monsters and mythology and things like that. And I know a lot of other people are too. And I know people have requested that as a topic. And it was always a little tricky to dive into because there is a very thin line between like mythology and folklore and religion. And while I feel totally fine being like, yeah, let's talk about like this weird mythological monster, like that feels fun. If you start to like veer into religion, like then it starts to feel a little flippant and disrespectful. You can step over that line really easily if you're not thinking about it and paying attention. So it took me a while to sort of get to the point where it's like, okay, how do we tackle this in a way that like, where we're talking about mythology, but we're not just talking about Western mythology, but we're not being disrespectful, like that everyone's, all that. And I think I've found a place that I was happy with by mostly focusing on like putting the focus more on monsters than anything else, where it's like, okay, no matter what, like, you can sort of talk about like the monsters that appear in folklore and religion and stuff like that. And everyone sort of acknowledges like, well, it's a monster. Like no one's gonna be offended if you're talking about like, well, not no one, but like I can talk about like the beast in the Book of Revelation or something like that. And like, that's a Christian monster, but is like, no one's going to be like, this is disrespectful to Christianity because you mentioned the beast. And it's like, no, come on. This is a thing that is like fun to talk about. It's like a crazy monster. So I'm sure now people are going to be upset at me, but it's, yeah, so that is tricky, but I think I found a place there that will make that both like respectful and a fun time to talk about.
I will say that I sent you in the past, I think through your Discord form for questions. I did send you lots of questions about, well, maybe not lots, but I did send you questions about Witcher 3, which has lots of like references to monsters and all that.
Yeah, I will say sometimes I will. It's not an active decision to avoid things, but sometimes I will naturally kind of like skirt around things that I just don't know super well, because it makes it hard for me to judge how difficult a question is, or how nitpicky, or like I don't have that barometer, which is why it's nice when I have Saltzman working with me, where it's like between the two of us, we can sort of like cover a lot of different areas, and he can be like, oh, I know this is like this kind of question. But it does make it hard where sometimes, like, because I haven't played any of the Witcher games, so if I get like a question like that come in, it's like, is this something that happens 2 minutes into the game and anyone who's ever played it will be like, yeah, of course, man? Or is this something that happens on like hour 50 of the game, and only if you go to a special place, and no one's going to get it? And then because I don't know it that well, I also won't have much to say about it because it's like, I don't know what I'm talking about. So it's like, if this turns out to be like a really hard question that I don't know what I'm talking about, then it's just like a bunch of people on the couch being like, so yeah, I guess, I guess Geralt did this thing. I don't know. Okay, moving on. Which, isn't fair to. I try to like research topics that I know I'm not as versed in, so I can speak to them if I can. But if I'm like behind on my work or really busy, and I have one question where it's like, oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about here, and one where it's like, I'm gonna have to do a bit of research to know what I'm talking about. I'll veer towards the easier one. I will.
Great. I mean, lots of those questions, I mean, I don't think there might be like questions that could be very nitpicky, but nitpicky not in the sense that that the show wants, but nitpicky like in the sense that you need to actually do 50 hours of gameplay.
Yes. Yeah, it's like I am like a little like picky about the questions, and there's no good like hard rules about like what question makes me go like, yes, great, and which ones make me go like, I don't know. A lot of it is just a pure gut thing, but I'm saying this mostly for folks who have like submitted questions through our system. So yeah, sometimes I just won't see them, and then others it's like I do have this like guidelines that I will break myself all the time, but if I'm reading other people's questions, I will be like a little harsher on, just because it's like I don't have to do the work of writing them. But it's like if something feels too just like swapping like A for B and there's nothing else to say about it, like I tend to steer away from those, where it's just like, you said this was a dwarf, but it's actually a hobbit. It's like, I don't care, but I do care if like, it's like, well, this is like one of the very early questions we had in one of the web series talking about like, the fact that Gandalf isn't technically a human, you know? And like, it's like, no, it's specifically like, it's like, he is Maiar. Like, it's specifically said, this is a separate race, but he appears human for all intents and purposes. Like, so like, that's interesting to me because like the average person would assume he's human and he does human things. And we have a context for humans who cast magic. So you wouldn't think that's like a separate race. So to me, that's interesting to be like, no, he's not human, because it's surprising. But if you were like, you know, if it was just like, I said he was, you know, I said he was whatever, so, something that like where there isn't any surprise there, it's just like you've swapped a specific. It just doesn't give me as much to talk about. And then the really, like, really hard, really nitpicky stuff where like where it's like even like the case of like, it's just like a wording difference where it's like, where even after you do the correction, it's like someone could still be like, yeah, but is that true? Like, I do like having like real, like hard and fast, like, no, this is like absolutely, there's no arguing this correction. This is the case. So like trying to find that middle ground where it's hard enough and easy enough and surprising enough, but not too picky. And I'll be very selective when I'm looking at other people's questions. So if you got one on the show, congratulations, because it meant I went, that's fun.
Is it still relevant for people to send questions through Discord?
It is, yeah. I never know, because with the question collecting, most of that's handled by someone else. So setting up the form and sifting through the questions, like I'll look through kind of like the final stuff, but like the initial passes are done by someone else. And I never know if they're going to set up like a new system, if like they ran into problems with the old one and want to be like, okay, like let me like reorganize these. Let's make sure things don't get lost with the old questions or anything like that. So I never know exactly like when they're going to start collecting, if they're going to collect from the same link, blah, blah, blah. But at least right now, I am planning on having more fan submitted questions in the next season. So there will be more opportunities to submit more questions. I don't know if it'll be at the same place at the same time, but that opportunity should come up. Probably soon. It should be explicitly laid out soon. Because I think last I heard, we're planning on shooting the next season towards the end of this year. So sometime between now and the end of the year, there will probably be some call for like, hey, if you want to submit a question, this is a good time to do it. Okay, awesome.
Someone wants to thank you for being a very good beast master on.
I'm happy to be.
Pat questions. No. Okay, what topic on Actually did you not prep for, but you really want to have on the show? Like something that you want to do in the future, but you didn't do yet.
Oh, interesting. I'm trying to think about. Okay, so one that I've tried to do a couple of times and have always just been like kind of throwing my hands up a bit. Is professional wrestling, because I am extremely not a wrestling fan. I there's some things like comics say where it's like, oh, I've read a couple of comics and I've liked the ones I've liked for the most part. And it's just like a world that's so big, it's a little hard for me to dive into, but I enjoy it for the most part. Wrestling is like, I don't understand this. I don't like this. I don't get it. But I know that there is like this kind of interesting overlap between a lot of wrestling fans and a lot of like genre fans, and it does have like, it does weirdly like have a lore, and so like there's like stories and things to pull out of. It's always been a little hard to write questions for it though, because so much of the stuff is like, it's almost more like sports questions of being like, you know, who won this tournament? What was this? Which isn't as interesting as being like, oh, here's a character bio and there's something weird about the character bio. There's some of those. Sometimes you can like come up with like, it's like, oh, like here's some weird facts about like the character of the Undertaker, say, you know, and there's something to do there, but it's hard to write more than a couple questions about it. For me, one, because I don't like it and don't know about it, and two, because I do think it's like the world is not as it's more like kind of hard like facts, like this is a thing that happened versus like here's a weird thing about someone imagined a world and in their crazy imagination brain they did something. So I do think it'll have to be I am once again trying to make it happen. I haven't yet started it because it's intimidated me a little bit. I think I'll probably end up veering a lot of my questions towards those sort of character questions and character creation, because that's where the lore really comes in. But there's a chance it'll just stymie me again and I'll have to do something else. But yeah, it's those kinds of things that are the stuff that is like, I don't personally know about this, so it makes it really hard to research the questions, because there's no benchmark for what's hard and what's easy.
Okay. There was a video, a song that was released on Dropout a few days ago.
Yes.
And you appeared in it.
Yes.
I think you tweeted about it. I'm not. I don't want to go into the political implications of that song, but I did want to ask you. You were actually physically in front of a camera.
Yes.
So is this like is this means that you Dropout found a way to quote unquote go back to the studio?
Sort of, but not I mean, so I was in front of a camera there, but I was it was as locked off a shot as it could possibly be, you know. So like I was still like a huge distance away from anyone else there. I was the only one in the shot. Everyone was wearing masks. There were maybe 2 other people in the space at the time, you know, so it was probably like more secure than like the grocery store. Like once you kind of like take everything into account, it's like, oh, there's more people in a grocery store and they're closer than I was to any person on that set. But I don't know that like that was also an easy one to do because it's like, oh, the nature of this video is that everyone has to be wearing a mask too. So like, it makes sense to be shooting scenes where people are wearing masks. It was a kind of like a confluence of things that's like, oh, this makes sense to do this. I don't know if that's something that they're looking to try to replicate. Since I'm not there full time anymore, I don't really know the details of a lot of the production stuff. I think if there is something like that where it's like, oh, we're able to shoot this in such a way that it's safe and it's the creative isn't compromised, they'll probably look to do it, but I don't know if there's like long-term plans for like a bunch of things like this. Okay.
These were all the questions I had for you. Thank you so much for
Absolutely,
taking the time. Before we wrap this up, please tell the world where they can find your work, where they can find you. Are you still looking for work?
Yep. Like so many others. Yeah. You can follow me on Twitter at Mike W. Trapp. You know, I'm still like right now, you can't see a lot of me anywhere else. You know, like you can still see some stuff on Dropout, still doing occasional things with college humor. Other than that, a lot of my stuff is on computers and in drawers and is not out there in the public yet. Hopefully that changes soon, but you know, nothing about this year has been predictable, so I'm not going to make any predictions about the future. Okay, great. I do want to see your blog more active, Trapp. Yes, I ran out of. So I was posting on my website a bunch of scripts that are like, oh, these are scripts that I do think are, it's like I do think these are still kind of, there's something redeeming about these scripts, even if they weren't able to be made for production reasons or timing reasons, or if they're a little bit shitty. And it's like, man, it's like I know why this sucks, but also I still think there's a nugget of goodness in there. So I was sharing some of those on my site, but I did kind of run out of those scripts. I still have a bunch of unproduced scripts, but there are ones that when I look at, I go like, yeah, this sucks. Like, there's not a lot to say about this one. It maybe has one good joke in there, but I totally get why we didn't make this. So I haven't felt compelled to share those. And I've been, but yeah, like I might repost some things if I find some other hidden gem or something. I'll put something back up there.
Okay. I do want to see more of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to collect all those questions and do this. I have no idea what time it is over there, so hopefully it's a reasonable time.
It's like 9 p.m.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, that's fine. That's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Trapp.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to do it. Have a nice day. See you around.
You too.
Bye, everybody.